Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another one of CPDSO's weekly webinars. Today, we are going to be looking at promoting the mental health of you and your colleagues through the coronacoaster. The first time I heard that term actually coined by Harriet. Did you coin that? I'm not sure.
No, I can't take credit for that. I'll happily steal it and pass it off as my own.
But that is the title of today's webinar. So promoting mental health of you and your colleagues through the coronacoaster. I just want to welcome everyone that's here today. We're still getting people flooding in through that waiting room. It was a topic that attracted a lot of you. So we're expecting quite a few people on today, which is great. So welcome everyone from wherever you are around the world, because our audience is often global. So whether you're hailing from the States, Africa, Asia, Middle East, Australia, or any other part of the world, or even just here in England, London, we welcome you. Thank you for being with us today. So today, just going to go through a few formalities, going through a few housekeeping bits with you all. If you can, and you do have your videos on, could you please turn your videos off? This video is going to be shared afterwards on YouTube. So just for GDPR purposes, could you please switch your cameras off for us? It does save us a great deal of time in the editing section and everything like that. So if you could please just turn off your cameras, it would be much, much appreciated. Q&A, there's going to be Q&A opportunities naturally towards the end of this talk. So please do use the chat, get your questions in early, and we will be putting them to Harriet at the end of the session. So just to go in a little bit deeper on the chat etiquette now, guys. So pay attention, please. The chat will be off. So the chat will be off, and everything will be coming through to me. So please do, when you're sending things over to myself, please do, if it's a question, please do put a Q at the beginning of it so I can easily identify it as a question. It will save a lot of time of me kind of scrolling through things. We also please also send support and other things in the chat, queries or other things that you have in the chat as well. They will all be coming to me, other than times when we will be opening up the chat for engagement purposes. So there might be times when Harriet wants to ask something, she will make it known, so it will be clear when the chat's open. And at that point, just feel free to engage with the chat for me. But like I said, please do use it all the way through to send questions for myself. Just put a Q at the beginning of the sentence so I can easily identify it as a question. So there'll be no opportunity for self-promotion in today's webinar. But like I said, please do send all the support you want. Say, Dan, you're doing great. Harriet, you're amazing, and everything else. Guys, please, again, if you're just entering the room, because we are having people coming into the room now, please do, if you could just turn off your videos, it would be much appreciated. So the only two videos that should be on is myself and Harriet. So the only people you should be able to see right now is myself, the troll, and Harriet, the princess. So please do turn those off for me. It will be much appreciated. Okay, guys, swiftly moving on. If there are any complaints, please do send it to myself on my email. I'm just going to put the email into the chat now. So if on the off chance you do have any complaints, just send that through to myself. My email is in the chat for you all. Just putting that in there for you now. So there you go, guys. Please do send me any complaints that you do have, if any. It is a rare thing, but it's there for you guys if you do need that. Okay, moving on swiftly. We're just going to run a few polls quickly. We do this at the beginning of all our webinars just to find out what other topics you would like us to present on. What else would you like us to find presenters for and bring them onto the CPDSO weekly webinar? So I'm just going to run that poll for you now. So that's going to be up on your screen now, guys. So what topic do you want us to present on in the coming weeks? So there's 5 options there for you. If you could please engage with that as soon as possible, because we do want to get Harriet on as soon as possible today. So we've got the importance of emotional intelligence, presenting without the drama, how to increase trust in your brand and with your delegates, how to use PPC, advertising effectively, which is pay-per-click, if you don't know. And finally, LinkedIn Sales Navigator walkthrough. So that's the LinkedIn Sales Navigator walkthrough. So I'm going to give you guys another 10 seconds there. Oh, no, 5 seconds, you're doing well. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Fantastic. Brilliant. I'm going to share the results with you all today. So here we go. The importance of emotional intelligence, 1 by a mile. So we will be looking to get that scheduled in for you all as soon as possible. Thank you for participating in that. And then just one more poll quickly before I move on. So this poll is just really to distinguish who we have with us today. So your current position with the CPDSO. So if you could, again, please answer as fast as possible. We just want to know, are you a member or a non-member? And if you're a non-member, are you here just for the information, or would you like to become a member? More information on becoming a member. Thank you guys, filling up really fast. You're doing very well, thank you all. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds on that one. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you for that. Thank you for participating, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, moving forward. Just got a quick update for you all. It won't take me too long to go through this. We are currently championing the return of face-to-face training. So the return to face-to-face initiative is what we've coined it. And we do have a Facebook group for that. And we are currently seeking for people to engage with us on a survey. So basically, we are looking to push forward the agenda of formalizing the safety practices for getting training and coaching formally back from offline to face-to-face. So in order to do this, we've put together a survey from which we want you all to participate. And once we've kind of drawn back all the information, we're looking to consolidate that and propose the best guidelines for professionals, for professional trainers and coaches to the government Department of Innovation and Skills. So we're going to propose it to them and really push the initiative of getting face-to-face back, because we want a date. We want an actual date when they can say, okay, this is when an official date when trainers and coaches can get back online. Because once we've got that official date, our delegates are going to really know that, you know, things are safe. They've got procedures and guidelines in place, and we're all ready to go. So I'm going to share these 2 links with you now in the chat box. One is for some more information on the initiative, and the other one is for a survey, is the survey. So if you could, when you do have time, please just complete the survey. It'd be much appreciated. It is for us all. And we really want to do push forward that initiative of getting face-to-face back formally and officially to our delegates. So please do fill those in for me. Okay, fantastic. Moving forward. We're almost there now. Right, so today, for the rest of the session, it's going to be 50 minutes with a Q&A at the end with Harriet, who's going to be speaking. There is going to be recordings and slides available immediately after the session. Well, no, next week, most probably early next week, the recording and the slides will be with you. So please, if you do have to leave early, don't worry. We are recording and the slides will be sent along with that recording. So yes, moving forward again, here we have the speaker today, Miss Harriet. So Harriet is a keynote speaker a coach, and a comic. And her talents don't stop there. She's actually an author as well, of Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, which she wrote in collaboration with Ben Hunt Davis, the British men's rowing 8 team. And it's all about how they went from not being that great and not winning to becoming gold medalists. And it's about applying those principles that they use to go through that transformation to your life. So it's probably a great book, and you should probably go check that out. She is speaking today on behalf of This Can Happen events. That is an annual event. This year is happening on the 23rd to the 25th of November. And unfortunately, usually it is obviously in person, face-to-face, but this year it is going to be an online conference. More information will be sent out about that post talk, along with the slides and with the video. But for now, without further ado, I will hand you over to Harriet.
Oh, thank you very much indeed for that amazing introduction. So hopefully you can see my slides now. So yeah, just to boost up the This Can Happen conference, it's going to be amazing online. It's 3 days dedicated to promoting mental, health in the workplace, and addressing critical issues that affect mental health every day. Delegates will have practical solutions, plenty of chance to network, hear from panels, hear from speakers. So we'll send out the link, but basically you can register at thiscanhappenevents.com. So in terms of kind of what I'm bringing all kinds of different stuff to this talk around promoting your own mental health and those of your colleagues. So I've been coaching for 20 years, and although I'm not a qualified therapist, I want to make that perfectly clear from the get-go, but I have got some therapy qualifications because I think it's important as a coach to feel comfortable in that space. I've been a Samaritan volunteer. I've also had personal experience. My little black dress in the wardrobe of mental health issues is anxiety, so that's my bag. And also the stand-up comedy, there's an awful lot of mental health challenges, I'd say, in that industry. It's quite a common thing. So I'm going to bring all kinds of different references to this. But what we're going to cover today is I'm going to give a bit of context, and then we're going to look at what are some examples of mental health challenges and what impact might they have, so that we can raise our collective awareness and kind of bust some myths. We can look at the risk factors and the triggers. So throughout this, I really encourage you to think about what is your personal context and the context of your team, your tribe, whether it's family, work team, etc. So that all the stuff I'm talking about, you can think, oh yeah, that trigger, that's really relevant for me, or that's really relevant for my folks. We'll look at how to spot potential issues early, some of the kind of red flags that we can spot really early so that we can address things, and we'll look at how to initiate action. And let's start off with some context. I guess wrapping around all of the stuff that we are talking about today, my one mantra is going to be, what is inside my control? I love that expression of, you can't change the weather, you can't change the wind direction, but you can choose how to sort of tack, or how to sort of set your sails. So I think, it can feel like a really overwhelming topic to talk about mental health. And I'm delighted that in the last couple of years, it's become much more open. But I think if you find yourself at any point in this webinar or beyond thinking, gosh, where do I start? Then it's just, well, let's control the controllables. I can't stop all of the stuff that's going on in the world. I can't stop other people's behavior. I haven't got a magic wand. What is inside my control? And in that same spirit, I think it's rather like, I'm a physical first aider. You can also become a mental first aider, which I thoroughly recommend. And one of the first rules about being a first aider is, you're not expected to rock up and suddenly perform heart surgery on someone. You hand them over to the professionals. As a first aider, your job is to spot and to initiate some sensible actions, of which many times it's simply go and ring, the emergency services. So again, in all the things we're talking about today, I don't want you to think for 1 minute that you've got to kind of sort of, solve it all and address it all and so on. We're talking about first steps and initiating action. Okay. So one thing I'm not going to cover is the kind of business case for addressing mental health, because I'm guessing that if you're here on this webinar, I'm probably preaching to the converted. But if you are going to talk to colleagues or employers or employees about the importance of promoting this, then just know that there is a really strong business case out there. And I'm happy to say in the last couple of years, you know, even a quick Google and you'll find statistics and research on the benefits to employee engagement, improving absence, etc., etc. So if you do find you're having that, you know, conversation with people going, oh, there's another thing for us to worry about, and oh, you know, mothering people, etc. There's hard business case to back up all of what I'm going to talk about. But for today, I'm going to focus my time on the agenda I outlined. So first of all, examples of different mental health challenges. Now, as we go through this, I'm going to ask you some questions, and actually I'm going to keep the chat closed. I want to so that you have the chance to kind of reflect, you know, grab a pen and paper, you know, have a type, whatever, so to think as I go. And throughout all of this, there's one big caveat, which is it's messy, it's complicated. And I think, you know, sometimes we're looking for kind of easy solutions and nice, neat boxes and pigeonholing people, and it just doesn't work like that. So the bit I'm about to cover, please, 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 this is a framework, not a cage, okay? So I guess it's quite useful to think in terms of a spectrum of mental well-being. At one end of the spectrum being, we're able to cope with life's ups and downs, we can work effectively, we can have meaningful relationships, we can kind of weather the ups and downs. The next stage would be around if we're teetering into poor mental health, when there's temporary episodes of low mood or anxiety. So it's kind of, there are days when it's a bit of a wobble. Moving down the spectrum, I guess problems is when we'd start to define it in terms of the difficulties going on for a long time, or it's starting to affect our ability to enjoy life and our ability to work. And then at the kind of severe end of the spectrum, we're talking about significant impact. We're talking about complex or long-term or significant intervention. But it's messy, all right? It's not like we suddenly go, oh, I'm in this box today and I'm in this box today, etc. That's a useful frame. So first question for you, have a noodle. What are some of the mental health problems, quote unquote, that you have heard of? And there might be labels you think, oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word. Is that a negative word? Is that a kind of stereotype? Or there might be things that you're very familiar with or you're not familiar with. So just have a think, grab a pen and paper, or just, you know, have a think about what are some of the challenges or problems that you might have heard of? Okay, what are the names of them? And I'm going to give you, this is by no means an exhaustive list. Here's some classic examples. And what I want to pick up here is that often there are some things that, depending on which country you're in, they might, you know, actually there might be disagreement about whether that exists as a challenge in its own right. So take, for example, personality disorders. There's a huge difference in opinion around whether that's something that should be treated in its own right as a mental health challenge. Or whether it's some people would say it's putting together different components. Okay, so even the definitions are not straightforward, but I just want to pick up on a few of them here. So psychosis, for example, would refer to when people don't experience the world in a way that other people typically experience the world. For example, hallucinations or delusions. So when they can see people or hear voices that, you know, other people can't. That's, you know, example of psychosis. Bipolar disorder is where you have the kind of extremes of you know, sort of low mood and mania, as it were. So I had I was working with an organisation where a lady was talking about how you know, she'd driven to her parents' house 300 miles away to give them a bunch of flowers at 3 o'clock in the morning in a manic episode. And then there are other days when she, you know, struggled to get out of bed. OCD is another one to pick up. And I think certainly in English language, often people go, oh, I'm a bit OCD. But, you know, in its form, a kind of medical form, as it were, it's where there's a compulsion around behavior or routines that are getting in the way of everyday life. You know, if someone cannot leave the house unless they've washed their hands 25 times, or they can't go to bed until they've completed a sophisticated ritual to make sure they're safe, it's that kind of thing. But the two that I'm going to focus on in a little bit more detail are the first two, depression and anxiety. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of paint you a picture. I'd almost encourage you to step into the shoes of what this feels like. Now, this is a dangerous game because obviously I don't want you to get depressed or get anxious. I want to give you a little taster of what it's what it's like. Okay, so in a safe way, let's just have a little dip our toe in the water. So depression, I guess if you were to sum this up in pictures, all right, then a dark cloud would probably be the best visual representation of this, where the colour's drained out of the world, where there's no colour, there's no taste to food, so all of the kind of joy has been taken out of things. So it's a bit like if you ever put on a dark pair of glasses and everything looks dark. And I think what can be kind of terrifying about this is that things that people used to enjoy just are no longer enjoyable. Things that used to motivate them don't seem to motivate them anymore, that life is just flat. Or another picture that might sum it up is, imagine climbing up a sand dune. And if you've ever walked along a beach where the sand is really difficult to walk through, it's like, you know, walking through treacle, it's trying to get to the top of this hill and it's kind of like, this is difficult and hard, and what's the point? You know, there's a kind of pointlessness feeling to it. So in summary, it would be, you know, low mood, feeling hopeless, despairing, guilty, worthless, unmotivated, and so on. So we've all had days where we feel low, but depression is where that's, you know, it really is kind of global, and it's much more long term. To give you another example of what it's, you know, a mental health challenge that's quite a kind of common one is anxiety. And again, I'm going to, let's dip our toe in the water of what this might feel like. And a picture that might sum it up is this, that there's kind of the kind of fear of sharpness and jaggedness, that kind of feeling of restlessness, of almost waiting for the jump scare in a bad movie, or a kind of crackling fire would be another picture that might sum it up. That it's around just constantly feeling on edge, feeling fearful or restless or confused, can't settle, exhausted, panicking. It's a kind of, you know, it's got a real kind of energy and real negative energy about it. So kind of shake those both off, as I say, come back to the here and now. So I guess the question for you would be, I've given you a couple of quite different examples, but what might the impact be? In terms of, if I had either depression or anxiety and I'm trying to, you know, function in my life, I'm showing up for work, how might that impact my work? What might the impact be? So just have a noodle, have a think about what that might be. And so I'd keep encouraging you, think about your context, you know, your team, your employees, your colleagues, your customers, etc., your tribe, your family. How might that show up? So here's some this is an employee outlook survey, and they asked people for their responses, and you can see the percentages here, that one of the most common things was about difficulty to concentrate. Now this was a global question about people with mental health challenges per se. There's got quite a mixture of types. Taking longer to do tasks, having difficulty making decisions, finding it difficult to juggle things, being less patient, putting off work, being more likely to get into conflict with others. So the impacts can be quite significant, and they can be quite diverse. And one of the things I'd encourage you to think about as we go through this is how they can be misinterpreted. It's going to be a common theme through this webinar, that, for example, if I pick a fight with a colleague, I wonder how that might be interpreted by other colleagues or by my boss. You know, what might be the assumption around what's driving that behaviour? You know, Harriet's a bit of an idiot, or Harriet's a bit narky, or, you know, how often we think, I wonder what the pressure is that Harriet's under. I wonder if there's some challenges here that she needs some support with. Because often if someone presents with conflict, the temptation is to, you know, show conflict back. So yeah, just hold that thought in terms of what the impact is, and also how it can be misinterpreted. Okay, so let's look at the risk factors and triggers. And I want to start with triggers. How might someone be triggered from, you know, kind of struggling with life's ups and downs to being at a more severe end of the spectrum? And there are, I'll show you, you see there's a couple of graphs here. So actually, most of the time, if we're put under a little bit of pressure, it can actually improve our performance. So for example, my kids have just broken up. If we're really lucky, we'll have 2 teenagers in dressing gowns waltz in at some point during this webinar. And do you remember, you know, when you had summer holidays and you had homework to do, if you were anything like me, if you had all the time in the world and no pressure, it was really hard to motivate yourself to do that homework until your mum nagged you or it was the last day of the holiday. So actually a little bit of pressure can help us improve our performance, but there comes a point when that performance plateaus and it starts to tail off. And sometimes that can become a kind of severe turn, as it were, that it can tip quite quickly, that there can be a kind of trigger event. Sometimes it's more that there's the drip, drip, drip of constant pressure, so that it can be one tiny thing, the kind of straw that breaks the camel's back. So I'm going to give you some examples. What do you think might be some life and work triggers? Now, that's an oversimplification to divide things into life and work. It's not that simple, but have a think about what might be some triggers at work, or might be some triggers at home that can kind of tip people over the edge. So think about your context, your environment. I'm going to give you a generic list, but do think what yours are. Okay, so life triggers. Now, at the moment, in terms of macro events, oh my goodness, and this is the reason, one of the main reasons for running this webinar now, we've got COVID, we've got economic problems. In the UK, we've got Brexit. In other countries, there's, political, polarities. So actually at the moment we've got, tick, 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 tick. There's a huge macro pressure on people. I was talking to a chief executive this morning who has been running his own company for 17 years. And he was kind of, just tick, tick, tick in terms of how that's impacting him and his business. There might be personal life events. Perhaps there's a new role. A house move is one of the most stressful things we can do. A divorce, illness, bereavement. Or it could be in terms of our age. So statistically, midlife seems to be a bit of a dip for both sexes. If you look at life satisfaction surveys, for men under the age of 35, certainly in the UK, suicide is, one of the biggest causes of death for men under the age of 35. So there's something there about unsupported, male mental health there. Also hormones, and it's not just female, but for me personally, the menopause is one of the things that kicked off the anxiety, that the changes in estrogen levels. I had no idea. It's quite a common thing that can influence mood and bring on anxiety or depression. So there's all kinds of life triggers that can just tip us over the edge. So have a think for you now, for your tribe, for your team, for you personally, what might be some risk factors to just notice that the risk factors are higher. And then in terms of work triggers, these are some classic work triggers that might precipitate. So deadline, new role, new boss, new structure, fear of future redundancies. And I'm seeing that a lot in particular industries. And as people are coming off, as the furlough scheme in the UK and other schemes in different countries are coming to an end, that there's a question mark of, okay, what's the future job market look like? There's also the dynamic of kind of survivor guilt, post redundancies, that you can have this kind of flashpoint of a restructure, but then, people who stay afterwards can actually feel awful about it. There might be poor performance, either of an individual or a department, a particular bullying episode. And sometimes it can be just a pivot point about, lack of clarity of direction. There's a kind of point at which it's like, well, what do we do? So all of these triggers are things that can take us from the pressure being useful in increasing our performance to a point at which it's not. So I hope that's given you a flavour of some of the risks that might be in your environment and with your team, your tribe. Now, just to add to the fun, I remember as a child, why am I sharing this story with you? But I've started, so I'll finish. That we go playing in the local factory car park, as you do when you're a kid. And there was a pool of flammable, of oil, of petrol. And found out the hard way that if you mess around with that, it's likely to go off quite easily. So the triggers that we've talked about, in the last few minutes, they're dangerous enough, but if you have them in a flammable environment, then you can exacerbate the problem. So have a think about what might make a more flammable environment, both at work or life, and just think about it in your context. What are the kind of the cultures or the overall environments that make it more likely for a stress trigger to result in damage? Okay. So here are some examples, some kind of life examples. Discrimination. if you are constantly discriminated against, either, you know, whether it's gender, sexuality, ethnicity, whatever it is, it can just grind you down so that one of those trigger events becomes all the more powerful. Poverty and debt, that overarching kind of stress around that, again, creates a flammable environment. Other health conditions, the responsibilities of caring for others and not caring for ourselves, not putting ourselves first, and isolation. And I think one of the silver linings in the clouds of COVID is that people have come to realize that isolation isn't just, you know, the stereotype of the granny sitting on her own in a flat with her cat. That isolation could be regardless of age. You know, it's around you know, lack of connection in the most profound sense. It doesn't have to be just the elderly. What about at work? There are certain cultures where this kind of flammable environment is exacerbated. So perhaps it's a hero culture where it's like, come on, have you been to 3 time zones and have you pulled an all-nighter? And you know, that kind of pressure to be always on can create a flammable environment. The toxic culture, whether it's politics or bullying or undermining. The huge consequences of failure. So, for example, you know, dentists that's an industry, bizarrely, that has got quite a kind of mental health, has had in the past mental health challenges, because you've got sort of isolation, you've got customers who probably don't want to be there, and there are big consequences of failure. Lack of control over work. There was a study, a fascinating study back, I think it was in the 80s, where they assumed that as people got more senior, that the stress would build up. But actually, you know, the more senior you get, yes, the stakes might be higher, but actually you've got control. And what they found was some of the stress levels that were most intense were with people who had no control over their inbox, no control of what stroppy customer they've got to deal with today. So other examples to pick out, for example, night shifts or changing shift patterns. There's some physiological stress there that happens when you've got no vitamin D or your body clock is all out of sync. So in summary, in terms of the kind of risk factors, if you could almost do an audit of how flammable might be my working or life environment, and what kind of triggers might there be to kind of light that petrol, as it were, then that can give us a sense of some of the kind of mental health dangers or pressures that we might be facing. So, I mean, already hopefully you've started to see how we can spot things, but let's get a bit more into it. You know, imagine an individual, and how would you spot with an individual that there's something to look out for. So let's imagine Magda, your colleague Magda. Just to sort of paint a scenario, Magda's in your team. She's a superstar. You've loved working with her. She's worked with you for sort of 5 years or so, but she's been incredibly frustrating over the last year because, you know, she really is ready for promotion, but it's almost like she's kind of lost her mojo, and she just seems disinterested in that promotion, and she's started to kind of miss deadlines. She's kind of gone off the boil. And she's just got married, and you know, the assumption is, oh, I think she's probably just wants to go and have kids, and you know, maybe she's just checks out of work. Now, you then get a call from HR, and Magda and HR, and you sit down together, and it turns out that Magda has had a really challenging time at home and at work, and has been diagnosed with depression by her doctor, and she's considering medication, and she's talking very openly with you about what she can do in the workplace. And you are kicking yourself, and you're, you know, really upset. What could you have done? What could you have seen? What could you have spotted to help Magda earlier? So let's, with the benefit of hindsight, let's think about what might we have spotted sort of early that might be some signs. Now, the temptation is to mind read. We do it a lot as human beings. We're a daft species. So I've got a blue line here. You know, on one side of the blue line is Magda. We do not know what she is thinking. We don't know what she's feeling, and we don't know what she's experiencing. All we can do is guess or find out based on the other side of the blue line. We can hear the words she's using. We can see the actions she is or isn't taking. We can see her body language, and we can see the kind of results that she's getting in the workplace. So I think there's often a real worry when we talk about mental health challenges that we've got to be some kind of amazing empathetic mind reader. It's like, no, don't cross the blue line. Don't guess, don't assume. You know, it's like when people say, oh, I know how you feel. No, you don't. You're not in my body feeling you can guess, you can empathize, you can have an inkling, whatever, but you don't know. So I bet you there will have been words that Magda used in meetings, on emails, you know, that flagged up that, you know, perhaps, you know, if you look back at some of those emails and so on, that you can see the lack of confidence showing up in her words, or the feeling of overwhelm showing up there. In terms of her actions, I mean, the fact that she wasn't interested in that promotion, we made the assumption as a manager that it was because, you know, she just got married. We made a really huge wrong assumption there. Did we ever ask her, you know, what was driving that? With her body language, sometimes there's clues there that people's body language shifts. You know, if I said to you, sit the way you'd sit if you were tired, you know, you'd probably go, oh, like that, or sit the way you'd sit if you were motivated. Now, there is for sure also, you know, people with mental health challenges can be really good at hiding it. So I'm not saying that you've got a magic, you know, none of these are a sort of magic indicator of what's going on, but, you know, there would be clues. And then in terms of the results, like I talked about, you know, she'd started to kind of put off work and so on, but there were clues there. So there is a huge range of clues that actually were probably there, hiding in plain sight. And for me, and I put some examples here, but it's really hard to put examples that are going to be relevant to everyone. I think for me, the key is what's changing. What's changing? What's different from the Magda that you normally know? That is often the kind of indicator that you know, that there might be something to explore. So for example, you know, the examples I've got here, things like poor prioritizing, not finishing tasks, you know, different working, etc., not stepping forward, could be clues. So what do we do? So I'll finish off this, the next chunk is about what do we do. And do remember, right at the beginning of this webinar, we talked about controlling the controllables and that first aid kit. You know, we don't have to go in and fix Magda. We don't have to perform open heart surgery. And you've had different roles, all of you folks on this webinar today. Maybe you're Magda's manager, maybe you're her, you know, cousin, maybe you're her neighbor, who knows? Okay, so we're looking at the kind of what's appropriate action. And I'll introduce you to Sven as another example. So Sven is about to join your company. And he was very clear in recruitment that he has anxiety issues, which can manifest in obsessive compulsive routines. He's explained that he's got some, you know, coping mechanisms that he has, and he's been quite clear with you about signs for you to look out for. All right. So, you know, what action could we take with Sven, kind of brand new employee? So we haven't got the past history that we have with Magda. You know, we don't know what Sven's normally like. What can we do? Okay, so just have a think about what you would do and what might be some things. So the first thing is around kind of prevention. You know, if he's starting the company, I wonder what kind of induction and training is going to help him to thrive in the first 90 days. I wonder if there's flexible working patterns. Perhaps he knows that, you know, his anxiety is exacerbated by, you know, certain time pressures. You know, it could be there's certain times of the day or certain commuting patterns, etc., that help and hinder. What's the physical working environment that's going to help him thrive? Now, obviously, this is fascinating during COVID, but if we imagine a future where we all are back into the office, and it's a real cliche that often the new person joins and they're shoved at the end, you know, by the door, they're kind of crammed into a new space, and it's, you know, they're not given a kind of environment to thrive in. What's the support network? How can we actively build a support network so that it's not just, you know, say you're their manager, you know, it's not just you, it's, you know, are their buddies, multiple buddies, are their mentors, are their sponsors, you know, how can we make sure they're really held? What regular check-in conversations are useful? And for me, there's a distinction between checking in on someone's work and checking in on them as a person. How are you doing? How's it going? Not just how's that report going? And then good line management as I mean, that's a big bucket. Let me oh, that one's popped in. Appropriate recruitment and promotion. Right, good line management. That sounds a massive bucket. And I'm saying line management because, you know, people join a company and leave a manager, and it is, you know, management style's second main cause of work-related stress, so no pressure. But every colleague has a huge amount of power to make a positive difference. So let's just unpick what we mean by being a positive colleague. And we could spend days on this in its own right. I've just put it into useful buckets. So the first thing is around intention. What is our intention? And for me, a lot of politics is driven by, for me to be big, I need to make you small. So really at the intention of I'm okay, you're okay. You know, we're both sort of equal size, as it were. Then that really, it drives the right action. I guess it's a bit of a daft parallel to draw, but in the same way that in most countries there's a difference between manslaughter and murder, because it's around the intention behind the act. Is that a useful parallel to draw? No. Skills at the bottom of this. There are skills that are really going to help. So depending on the role that you've got, are you equipped to, have you got coaching skills? Have you got listening skills? Have you got the skills to have difficult but profound conversations? Have you got the skills to, you know, deal with performance? Have you got the skills to delegate effectively? You know, skills underpin all of this. Actions, it can be as basic as having a rhythm, a process of, like, we have weekly one-to-ones, we have weekly team meetings. You know, I always make sure that I check in with my colleague at this time. So just the kind of physical translating the intention into action. Openness, the openness to ask for feedback ourselves. I think I've seen there's a lot of training, a lot of courses on giving feedback, rightly so, you know, really should be. I wish there was more about asking feedback, because it sets the tone. So, you know, simply asking someone, you know, how did that land? How was I in that meeting? You know, when we worked together on that report, was that useful, et cetera, kind of just increases that culture of openness. And then the quality of conversations. If you strip away technology and process, really any organization is a collection of all the conversations that are had. So the quality of the conversations is crucial. And often that can be as simple as just, are you okay? Or how are you doing? I mean, we could run a whole webinar on having effective conversations. There's I've got books and books on the bookcase behind me. Crucial Conversations is a great book. Difficult Conversations is a great book. But just simply having that connection, opening up the conversation. So I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute. I just want to give you some further resources. I'll put together a free set of coaching resources. And I did it at the start of lockdown because I'm rubbish at sewing face masks. And I thought, well, how can I help? So I put some free resources up. So the mini videos on things like dealing with overwhelm, handling change, channeling anger, being empathetic, little 3-minute videos with accompanying PDFs just to help, you know, help folks navigate this storm, as it were. So you can get that at harrietbeveridge.com. This Can Happen has got some fabulous resources. They've done a lot of webinars that are recorded and are freely accessible. So, you know, real treasure trove on This Can Happen. And that's also where you would go to register for the conference. The Mind website, I think, is fantastic. It's so down to earth and practical and human to human. So I think especially if you've got someone who you're encouraging them to access resources themselves, and you know, they want to feel held, if you see what I mean, then it's a fabulous set of resources on Mind. There's loads of kind of management guides. For example, the CIPD Mind publication is a good one. In terms of books, Loving What Is, Bar and Katie is great. TED Talks, particularly recommend Brené Brown on vulnerability. And then, yes, Crucial Conversations, I've forgotten I reference it, is by Granny Patterson and co. So lots and lots of further resources. So time for questions. I will open it up to questions. I'll hand back to Daniel to open it up for questions. And I guess, what questions have you got, either for me or for each other? You know, there's a huge collection of people on this webinar, so I don't know, you know, sometimes it's tapping into that knowledge. What are your key reflections? So maybe it's not a question, maybe it's just a reflection, you know, a takeaway, a learn. I wonder what's one simple thing you can do this week to promote mental well-being. I passionately believe we've all got so much power to improve the mental well-being of, gosh, even, you know, even the person that we have an interaction with in a shop, or for example. Or what are 3 simple things you can do this month? So far away with questions, but also with thoughts, with reflections. So Daniel, over to you in terms of seeing what's coming in on questions. If you're there, Daniel, and take it away.
I'm here indeed. Thank you so much for that, Harriet, that presentation. So yeah, guys, please do start to get the questions in now. We are ready to take questions, so you can start to use that chat. Again, when you are sending over a question, just put a Q at the beginning. It's going to come directly to me, and then I'll obviously be able to send that over and question Harriet on that. We did have a couple of questions sent in before the webinar. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick off with those questions. If anything's coming to mind, please do feel free just to throw it in the chat quickly. So let's ask these questions. So Dave asked, what are the most common signs and symptoms in teenage sufferers? So what are the most common signs and symptoms in teenage sufferers, and do they differ?
Yeah, and I'm, you know, say A, I'm not a you know, qualified therapist, and B, I deal more with adults in my coaching work than teenagers. So I talked to a couple of school counsellors to answer that question, and the feedback I got was it's very, very similar to what we've just, you know, there's no fundamental difference between adults and kids. However, some of the pointers were around, you know, in terms of who's trusted, who they trust, that can almost be a bit more complicated than with grown-ups. And for example, it may well be that if they're in an environment where they feel safe, I'm caricaturing, but they're more likely to kick off. So for example, you know, teachers and counsellors at school would be aware of if someone's kicking off at school, is it because they feel safe here and they're not feeling safe at home, for example. So it might not just be changes in behaviour per se, but it might be just making sure that it's joined up across who's interacting with that child. So making sure that, oh, they're here, they're fine here. Well, you know, it's showing up here. And also because, oh God, I feel so elderly when I look at my kids and how much they're online and how much, you know, they are digital natives compared with me. So I think there is so much stuff we don't see. It's very, very easy for them to hide it from us. So I guess rather, you know, it can be frustrating that the signs might be more difficult to spot, because I don't know, you know, I certainly have no access to, you know, like Snapchat or whatever, it's gone, you know, deliberately, they do that. So I think there's more around, you know, how can you make sure that education, that knowledge is there for them at school or out with, and how can you just make sure that, you know, they feel really, really held in different support, that there's different support, because it frustrating as a parent, you might not be the first port of call.
I was actually surprised that you had a couple of teenagers, actually, when you said.
Oh, Daniel, flattery all day.
Yeah, no, I'm not even joking.
Loving
I'm
it.
actually not joking at all. Anyway, I was seriously. But anyway, next question. So David, thank you for sending in a question. How are the mental health technicians supporting children that both parents fell prey to the coronavirus infection? Wow.
Oh gosh, no, I mean, I don't know. That's a really interesting, in terms of social work support, both in the UK and internationally. You know, that's in terms of when someone's fallen ill, physically ill with coronavirus. I think what's also going to be very profound over the coming months is the mental health challenges of, it's just like, it's same storm, different boats. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I was up at, we were watching our kids doing socially distanced football, which is a hilarious thing to watch. They just hoof at each other from the side of a field. And I was looking at the parents standing around, and, you know, you've got, you know, a doctor who's been in the eye of the storm on the front line. There's someone who's been furloughed and basically seems to have, you know, redone her patio and had a whale of a time. There's someone whose business has basically collapsed, you know, and everyone's standing around. So I think that's really going to unfold in the next wee while is yeah, that kids are going to be channeling that, that pressure from, you know, from both parents. And I think when our journey, a lot of people I'm finding are kind of like, oh, it's fine now. But for a lot of people, it really isn't. And we just got to remember it's, you know, same storm, different boats. So I don't know is the short answer to that question, but I think again it's that thing of like, what can we do? Control the controllables. What's my contribution? And I've seen a lovely comment on chat, like sometimes a compliment or a thank you can be a simple way of improving someone's well. But amen to that. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Alma sent in a question. So Alma is working in a predominantly male environment, and they find it that people are open to speaking when approached, but other than that, they're pretty standoffish. So how can that be? How can that be broken? How can that stigma be broken in a predominantly male environment?
So I'm wondering if that's just conversations per se, or if that's conversations about mental health specifically. I don't know.
I believe it's, yeah, sorry.
Can you tell from the question, Daniel? Or
yeah, I believe it is regarding mental health. Yeah, the stigma around mental health issues and males.
I think it's just creating that environment. I've really noticed, like menopause, I'll take as an example. 3-5 years ago, no one had heard of it, completely taboo, real kind of like middle-aged, problem. But just there's more webinars, there's more books, there's more celebrities talking about it. It's just, TV programs, it's coming out of the cupboard, as it were. And I think mental health is the same, that there are some organizations where they've had a gazillion webinars on it, and there's some organizations where there's been nothing. So I think it's just, how can you coax, how can you tag it on to a meeting that's already happening? How can you have a speaker? How can you just gently, but it could be as simple as just having that check-in of how is everyone today? Or it could be using Corona as an excuse, like this is something we should be looking at because, but it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint, I think.
Definitely, I think the idea of using Corona as an excuse, definitely, because that does link pretty easily to anxiety, especially. People are a lot more anxious just across the board because of this. So definitely linking it to real events that are affecting everyone, because then there's no escape for anyone. So everyone has to have an opinion, I guess, in that sense.
No, for sure.
Got loads of questions coming in now. Thank you guys. Right. So the poll demonstrated, and this is John, and he's referring to the poll that I put out earlier about the different subjects that we're going to be presenting moving forward. So the poll demonstrated a clear interest in emotional intelligence. Is there a link between emotional intelligence and mental health? Really interesting question.
Oh gosh, I mean, yes and no. That's a really interesting question, because in some sense I'd say yes, because emotional intelligence is all about how aware am I and how much can I regulate myself, and then how much does that translate into my interactions with other people. So in one sense, to be really aware and to be able to regulate, does mean it promotes my mental health. But then it almost sounds like, oh, if you just looked after yourself, you'd be fine. And it isn't. So in that sense, it's not that straightforward, if that makes sense. So you might be amazingly aware and have all kinds of brilliant coping strategies and still have, a really difficult triggering event, or still have, the jury's out in terms of, what the genetic makeup and so on is. But I think emotional intelligence is about controlling the controllables. So the two are definitely linked. I wouldn't want to say, if you're emotionally intelligent, you won't have mental health challenges, because that certainly isn't true.
Yeah. So yeah, we are going to be doing that one on emotional intelligence real soon, John. And that even sounds like it's got the potential for, if it hasn't already, some real psychological people looking into it, basically, from a psychological perspective, for sure. Some studies should be done on that if they haven't already. So got another question in from Maxine. How do you differentiate between drug and alcohol misuse and mental health issues?
Oh God, again, that's another cracking question, because it's such a tangled web, because, it goes both ways. Yeah. So I think that, drug and alcohol and eating and so on can be a crutch, can be can turn into an unhelpful, unsustainable crutch. So I've seen, a number of people over lockdown, really turn to drink, for example, as a crutch. And it's just, and then actually alcohol is a depressant. So I think it just becomes a negative spiral. that, you know, hence the tangled web. And I guess, I mean, there's a whole body of stuff around self-care and well-being. And if you can get into that kind of virtuous circle of, you know, if I'm eating better, if I'm getting fresh air and exercise, and, you know, all the things our mums told us, do you know what I mean? And it's now the scientific research is coming along loud and clear to say this stuff physically will help you become more mentally resilient. So for me, for example, menopausally with anxiety, you know, making sure my magnesium levels were up, making sure I got more vitamin D, making sure I got more exercise, all these things really, really helped, you know, physiologically and mentally. So I kind of guess it's more like, where can we kind of cut the spiral? Where can we intervene to try and change the direction, if that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. I guess there's a big link between control and mental health in a sense. And when you've got control over something, even if it's a small thing, like you said, it might be like a health thing, where you're taking, that could obviously promote and kind of push you forward in those other aspects as well.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Got a question in from Richard. Really good one again. Great questions coming, guys. How would you approach an individual who is unwilling to confront their own mental health issues when you recognize the signs clearly?
Oh, I mean, that's just the toughest thing in the world, and it's heartbreaking. And how many people, you know, and it's the same with drug dependency and alcohol dependency, that, you know, the first step in kind of AA is around acknowledging it. I think that's a really tough one. And I think that's why I started off with the controllables. You can't stop, you know, you can't stop someone, you can't change someone. All that's inside your control is presenting evidence, is giving support, is holding someone, you know. And I think that's one of the hardest gigs, when the whole kind of you can lead a horse to water type thing. I mean, I think there is, again, with the conversation stuff, that's why I mentioned things like crucial conversations, that there's some great, I hesitate to say techniques, because that sounds like you're being really like, oh, I'll use this technique, but ways of really, you know, making sure you are heard in an authentic way. This is the facts. This is what I'm noticing. You know, you drank 12 bottles of wine last night. You were up, you know, this is the impact on me. So you're differentiating the facts and the stories, if that makes sense. You know, they can't argue with the fact, and also making sure you're clear on your intention. So there are some kind of good techniques and kind of tick lists of like, how can I articulate this in the clearest way I can? But also, I think we underestimate, it's going to sound really cheesy, but just like, you know, giving someone the love that they need. So I had a friend whose daughter was self-harming, and she immediately went into fix-it mode of finding the best psychologist, and how can I do this and how can I do that? And actually, she says, with the benefit of hindsight, the most powerful thing she did was just give her daughter unconditional love. You know, that intention bit. And yeah.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Another question in from Helen. She says it's kind of a question, I guess. It is a question, definitely, Helen. I can confirm that one. So do you think that all managers now need to go through a mental health awareness course, or do a mental health awareness qualification of some sort?
What's going through my brain is, that whole thing about what's going to engage people. So yes is the short answer, but then I guess that begs the question, well, what would that look like and what would that contain? And then the last thing I'd want to see people go, oh, tick, I've done the bloody course, you know. So I think it's more how can we engage managers to be good line managers? And, you know, and when I talked about what I meant by good line managers, how can we encourage them to have, you know, the intentions, the skills, the regular conversations and so on. And if we have to do that ninja under cover of radar, or do you know what I mean? So they don't just think I'm on a bloody mental health awareness course, then so be it, you know.
Brilliant. Okay, got a follow-up from that, basically, from Joanna. So if I could train my team in one skill base, what do you recommend?
Oh, that's a bloody good question.
We got some bright people on today, for sure.
I know, they're killing it. I'm only allowed to choose one.
Go ahead, pick two. I'm sure she won't mind.
Well, I mean, it's too big a bucket, this, but I think there's something about having conversations, having honest conversations, whether, you know, high performance conversations, critical conversations, call them what you will, so that when I say something to you, I'm saying it in an elegant way that is going to make it more likely that you'll hear me and understand what I really mean. And that when you're listening, or when I'm listening to you rather, that I there's more likelihood I will genuinely get the message and get you. There you go. I've managed to choose one, but it's a massive bucket. I was cheating.
Say another one for me while I pick out the next question.
Coaching, I guess, which is a specific type of conversation. I'm bound to say that I'm an executive coach, but I do think there's something pretty magical when you ask someone a question and they spiral off and go, oh yeah, no, you're right, I see. And you've got no idea what's going on in their head, but actually that one question has like freed them up massively.
Okay, this is kind of a question taken from a statement, but how do you go about distinguishing just a brief period of being emotionally unstable with a mental well-being issue?
And I think that's why, when I said, when I introduced those slides of the 4 circles, that it's messy, and it would be up to a clinician to say when you kind of fit the criteria of a particular label, as it were. I think for me, it's the more useful way of looking at it is, what's the impact on my life right now? So for me personally, with the menopause, they reached a point where it's like, I am turning down work because of anxiety. This has reached a point where I need to do something. This is, and with the benefit of hindsight, I think there would have been earlier times to intervene. So it's that point at which the impact of this is significant enough that I really need to take action. But then I say that, and obviously you don't want to get to that point. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I come back to the self-care bit about, I know for me personally that I've got really good habits around, certain exercise twice a week, walks once a day. I don't drink nearly as much. I've become a mega fan of non-alcoholic lager, because those are the useful habits that then will, I don't want to get to that place again.
And we'll take a couple more questions before we wrap things up, guys. So if you do have any final questions, please do send it in. This one from Chris. Is the environment more important than actions? So I think he's talking about broaching mental health conversation. Is the environment more important than the actions?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I'd have to ask about specifics on that. I'd hesitate to give a global definitive answer on that one, because, for example, I've worked with companies where the environment is so toxic that, I don't care what the action is. It's like, this place is just full of bullying, horrible politics. There's no one-off actions that's going to cure this. But on the other hand, I've seen profound conversations really make a step change in a relationship and reduce the toxicity. So I don't know, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Okay. Last one from Manya. She asks, what is the underlying reasons why someone would transition from poor mental health to mental health problems and then to severe mental health problems?
Yeah, and I think it's all the things we've talked about. It's a very unique personal thing. I think it's a jigsaw puzzle. So again, to use me personally as an example, I think menopause hit when I was in an environment where I was working in a very isolated environment, and so it was that kind of jigsaw puzzle together. Maybe in a parallel universe where I was in a different environment, then some of those physical symptoms wouldn't have had such an impact. So I think it's looking across the full range of them.
Brilliant. And so I have to ask this one for the last one. It's kind of looking at the other side of things as well, when people kind of try to abuse this and use it as an excuse. So how do you spot the professional Oscar-winning performers who practice the fake it technique so well? That's from Marie. I love the way she proposed that question.
Yeah, and again, I think this is so hard. I think it comes back to that slide I showed of Magda and the blue line, that you ultimately, and again, I don't know what the context here is, but say there was someone in my team that was being a kind of Oscar and I felt like they were taking the mick. There's something about the clarity of expectations and, clarity of what good looks like and what the expectations of the role and delivery are. And then, focusing on the facts of, you know, deadlines missed or, you know, et cetera, to try and move away from the story drama, as it were. Yeah, let the facts do the heavy lifting, as it were. But no, and that's a, you know, it's hard. I'm not gonna pretend that's straightforward.
No, definitely. And just to wrap it up, we had some really great comments coming through as well. So thank you all for your support and the great comments coming through, especially from Christine. She sent in a comment about immediate implementing of some of what she's learned today, and the great results that she's got from that with a staff member. So really thank you for that comment, Christine. Thank you for your kind comments, Helen, Ingrid, and the list goes on and on and on. Thank you all for those. Just to wrap things up, lastly, I just want to say a big thank you to Harriet for being here with us today, for the great presentation, and for fielding all of those questions so well. Thank you so much. Like I said, there will be a recording coming out to you next week, along with the slides, so you'll have all the resources there that Harriet put in the slides for you as well, along with the This Can Happen event link, where you can sign up for that event that's coming up in November. Finally, I'm just going to pop into the chat again. Lastly, just that questionnaire again, would really appreciate if you could get involved in this one, guys. We are championing the return of face-to-face training and coaching. So would really appreciate if you got involved with us and just completed this quick survey. It's only going to take around 4 minutes to complete. So if you could complete that one for us, that would be much appreciated. Just going to throw it in the chat right now for you. So please just copy and paste that link into your search engine and it will come up. Thanks again so much for joining us. Thanks again to Harriet. And again, we will be back next week with another CPDSO weekly webinar. Harriet, do you want to say any final words? No,
just thanks very much for amazing questions as well, and good luck with it all. And do get in touch via the website if there's anything that we didn't answer that you want to get, you know, me to answer.
Fantastic. All right, guys, have a great day, morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are. Enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully we'll be seeing you next week, Thursday, for another one of CPDSO's weekly webinars. Thank you.